guys, and welcome back to Beauty in the Bookcase, where we take a book and we make a look. Today is all about Jeffrey Eugenides' book Middlesex. So I wanted to make a few notes on the book before getting started. So this book was released in 2002, and throughout the story, the main character, Cal, is referred to as a hermaphrodite. However, I have done some research and that term is outdated and actually considered quite offensive and misleading and just leads to a lot of stigma. So today I will actually be using the term intersex, which is what the Intersex Society of North America suggests. Moreover, since Cal does transition between genders throughout the story, I will be using the pronouns they and them. And although this book did receive the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2003, it did receive some backlash, essentially because it compared Cal often to a minotaur and made some associations with intersexuality being kind of like a deformity or a monstrosity. And it also suggested that the reason that Cal was intersex was because of the incestuous history of the family. However, I do want to just make a statement that intersexuality is not due to incest. According to Maybelline Plus, there are various reasons why intersexuality happens. Some of those include congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is when the adrenal glands lacks certain enzymes to produce hormones. There also, another cause is an issue with there being too much testosterone in the woman while she's pregnant. So this can be from either taking a medication or something that contains testosterone, or even from a tumor. And the last of these conditions is an aromatase deficiency, which kind of like converts hormones from male to female, is my understanding. So for more on intersexuality, I did include the links from MedLink and to the Intersex Society of North America down in the description below, so you can go ahead and read some more. But just know that I will not be tolerating any type of negative or rude comments towards people who are intersex, so please be kind and courteous if you do comment, and let's get started. So Jeffrey Eugenides, who is the author of this book, was born in Detroit in 1960. He has published various essays, short stories, and novels. Among these, aside from Middlesex, which won him the Pulitzer Prize, as I mentioned earlier, he also published The Virgin Suicides, which then became a movie of the same name. So Middlesex kind of jumps around all over the place, but it's mostly following the story of Cal and their family. So it all starts with Cal's grandparents, Lefty and Desdemona. So they grew up in Mount Olympus in Turkey, and they are technically a Greek family. But yeah, so they were living in Turkey, but they had to flee the country when actually the Greek were going to invade it. So they came to America, and on the way here, Lefty and Desdemona, who were brother and sister, pretended that they didn't know each other while on the boat, and they ended up falling in love and getting pregnant with Milton, who is Cal's father. Now, Cal's father ended up marrying Tessie, who was his cousin. I know, I'm not even gonna touch the weird incest stuff. So Cal was actually misgendered when they were born. They didn't really realize that they were intersex until their teenage years. So a lot of their upbringing and a lot of, their earlier memories are of them being female. So from just the context clues that we get from the book and the research that I was doing about the actual, medical reasons why intersexuality does happen, it seems that for Cal, it was a type of aromatase deficiency, because it's not until their teenage years that their features start sort of presenting more masculine, and then an accident happens that leads to them actually discovering that that intersexuality was the reason why this was happening. But the book never actually addresses it this way. It's just treated as the product of the incest that was going on in the family. So as a teen, Cal kind of starts experimenting with their sexuality, which is fine. But then it was one day they were kind of hooking up with these brothers and sisters, not at the same time. I think like they had a thing with the brother and then they got involved with the sister, if I am remembering correctly. It's been a while since I've read the book, a few years actually. So then they were first with the brother, and then they realized that they had feelings for the sister, and when they got caught, they kind of ran away and got into an accident which landed them in the hospital, and that is how they found out about their intersexuality. And the doctors kind of were just a bit invasive, I guess is the word. You know, they were very much like prodding at everything and trying to be like, ooh, this is new and interesting, so we're just gonna like not respect this person's bodily autonomy. Anyway, there's a lot of weird malpractice things, I would say, with doctors in this book, so we're not gonna talk about that though. So after the intersexuality reveal, I guess, they are actually sent off to New York to meet with a doctor who is a specialist in intersexuality. However, it seems that everyone, including the doctor and Cal's parents, are pushing for Cal to just get surgery and fully become a girl. So they're not really consulted or anything, which leads to them kind of getting scared and running away. So that's kind of one of the main things that I wanted to talk about today, was the whole idea of gender identity, which is so crucial to the story, and sort of this struggle regarding bodily autonomy that Cal faces. So the first line in the book is actually, I was born twice, first as a baby girl and then as a teenage boy. And if that doesn't set up what the story is about for you, I don't know what else you could expect. I think it's a brilliant opening line that just like immediately, you know, draws you in and gives you like a million questions, obviously. So like I said, the book centers a lot around Cal and how Cal came to be. So that includes all the family relationships and all that. But in all of that, it's very quickly revealed to us that Cal felt most comfortable presenting as a male. However, despite these preferences, throughout the book, there are a lot of people trying to make this very important decision for Cal instead of actually asking them what they want. So as I mentioned, it's honestly quite possible that when Cal was born, it genuinely was a mistake that they didn't notice that Cal was intersex, because if you know, the real reason for their intersexuality is that condition that I mentioned before, it doesn't really present until their teenage years. So there wasn't, I mean, I don't know if there is a way for a doctor to tell, but from what I read on Maybelline, it did say that, you know, people usually don't know until their teenage years. So it is, of all the people that can be faulted for Cal's situation, I don't think the doctor that like birthed them is to blame. However, it doesn't stop there. You know, Cal grew up in a very, very, very traditional family. And by that, what I mean is their family was very much focused on standard gender roles. So what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is, you know, if you were a girl, you had to be very feminine. You know, you had to wear skirts and, you know, cook and be in the kitchen. And not that there's anything wrong with that, you know, but it wasn't like Cal was genuinely allowed to express their identity really in a healthy way, because it was just kind of like, well, you are a girl, so you do this, or you're a boy, you do that, and there's no wiggle room, you know, there's no two ways about it. And this clearly took a toll on Cal, because once they do grow up and they start realizing what, you know, the gender identity they identify with is, they go and entirely reject the feminine side of themselves and just go for the uber masculine. So what's really interesting about this to me is that, you know, nowadays we have a lot of movements and we have a lot of people talking about gender fluidity and all these different, you know, genders and sexualities and identities. And that clearly would have been really, really helpful for Cal, because they lived in a world of absolutes. You know, they either had to be a boy or they had to be a girl. And although, you know, the book very much suggests that Cal is happy presenting as a male, the lack of a conversation or visibility for people who were gender fluid, or, you know, who were somewhere in between and all that, you know, maybe that would have been a place that Cal could have gone to, instead of having to adhere to either feminine or masculine, and that's it. And, you know, a big part as well of the reason that Cal wasn't really allowed the time to explore their identity and sort of play around in their duality was because once they go to the doctor in New York with their parents, immediately they're forced to, I wouldn't even say make a choice. They're not really given a choice. The doctor immediately decides for them that because Cal had already spent, you know, so many years as a girl, presenting as female, that they should just go ahead and get surgery and fully become a woman. There's really no point in all the time that Cal does spend with the doctor, in which the doctor does some very inappropriate things. At no point really does anyone stop and ask Cal what they want. It's just kind of like, well, you were already a girl, so you must want to be a girl, right? So we're not even gonna ask, we're just gonna make this decision for you. And, you know, it's also even harder because Cal is a minor, so it's not like they would have a say probably anyway. Dr. Luce's decision making, I guess, for Cal goes as far as them even lying. So Dr. Luce says that essentially Cal's genetic makeup is mostly female. But then Cal actually manages to sneak a peek into their medical records, and it's actually not true. Cal appears to genetically be more male than female. So, you know, this is one of the many reasons that ends up prompting Cal to sort of run away from their family. And it's not really just the doctor. Cal's dad goes as far as to say, you know, we can go back home and be a family again once, you know, essentially you're fully a girl again. And, you know, it's really difficult because, again, Cal's feelings and their desires are never actually asked. They're just like, well, obviously we want you to be a girl, so you just have to be a girl and then you can come home, which is, of course, really hard for Cal because then they're facing this huge rejection from their parent. And this, of course, leads to Cal feeling very hurt and angry and rejected, and this is ultimately what leads them to wanting to run away because, you know, not only are they being forced into something they don't want to do and they're being rejected by their parent, they also have a moment where they look up their condition. They look up, again, what at that point was, you know, being a hermaphrodite, and they're painted as these like deformed monsters, which is obviously not what you want to read about yourself. I don't think it would make you feel, you know, too nice about yourself. And so this all kind of culminates with Cal deciding to run away because, well, you know, it's not like they had support or anyone to properly talk to or anything. And so once they've, you know, fully taken themselves out of this situation, they decide to just go chop their hair off and, you know, put on some more masculine clothes and just live their life as a man far, far away. So they end up in San Francisco. And while of course this is a great moment for Cal because they're finally being able to express themselves in an authentic way and in a way that feels good to them, they also at this time meet a man by the name Bob Presto. So Bob Presto takes Cal in even though they're a minor, and he worked at a club called the 69ers. So Cal ends up having their own show called the Octopussy Garden, in which essentially they're exposed and fetishized in like a type of peep show. So Cal ends up like, you know, constantly drugging themselves and then exposing themselves like in the water, like a type of mermaid, to people who just paid to see them, until eventually, you know, the place gets shut down and Cal calls their brother and they go back home. However, while being part of the show did provide Cal with some confidence in, I guess, their new identity, there was still a lot of exploitation that went on. And considering that they did have to be, you know, drugged up and that they were a minor, it just feels kind of gross and shady for that to have happened in the first place. It gets to a point where Cal has to even stop expressing themselves sexually at all because it all feels like, it feels wrong, and it feels like they almost feel like if they weren't intersex, they wouldn't be behaving this way, which is not true. So yeah, it's very hard for them. But of course, thankfully, this all does come together in a more positive way. Not only does Cal accept themselves and they are able eventually to go home, even though their dad's already passed away. So unfortunately, we don't really get to see that relationship kind of come back together. What we do get is seeing a moment where Cal has met somebody who they're revealing their story to, and this person, instead of being put off or uncomfortable, they actually embrace Cal, and they admit that they're very excited about getting to know them as a person and knowing more about, you know, their intersexuality and how they identify and how they live their lives. And it's a very heartwarming moment because we've seen so much rejection from the family and just such a struggle on Cal's behalf that it's wonderful to finally get that moment of being like, yes, you know, something good, and they don't have to run anymore because they're safe. They found a person they can be safe with. And we even get a very touching, well, I don't know if it's touching, but we do get a moment between Desdemona and Cal towards the end of the book in which Desdemona momentarily confuses Cal for Lefty, her husband. And then, you know, she realizes that it wasn't her son, but Cal, who ended up sort of paying the price for her incestuous relationship with her husband, who was also her brother. But, you know, instead of feeling, again, bad about themselves or just like feeling uncomfortable or like they need to retreat again or anything, Cal is really just able to be like, honestly, I like who I am, I'm happy with it, so I don't think it's a curse and I don't feel deformed. And that's a really powerful moment as well. Yeah, just real quick, I kind of wanted to go through some sort of like Greek mythology references in this in this book because I thought it was really interesting. So, you know, starting with Cal's name. So their birth name was Calliope Helen. So Calliope was actually one of the 9 muses. She was the muse of science and poetry. And, you know, that's very interesting because we have the scientific side represented by like her genetics in and of themselves and, you know, her intersexuality. And then the poetry comes from the fact that, you know, it's almost, as you read the book, it feels like an epic journey and, you know, kind of having those Greek, almost Greek tragedy vibes, which is really interesting, of course. And of course, we all know Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman who ignited a war. And although even Cal themselves, they, you know, they don't feel beautiful, they don't feel like they're the most attractive person on earth, but I think the link here is more about how they were conceived, you know, how they came to be. If you know the story of Leda and the Swan, which is how Helen came to be, you can almost make a parallel between the, I guess, to put it as politely as possible, the unnatural circumstances in which both Helen and Cal came to be. So that's a pretty interesting parallel. Aside from that, another really interesting similarity is that Cal compares themselves to Tiresias. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's a seer from Thebes who was cursed to be a woman for 7 years. And that, of course, is a very fascinating parallel because then we really do get to understand how Cal felt, you know, while being a girl. They felt like they were cursed. They felt like they were trapped. They didn't feel comfortable enough. There's all the references to the Minotaur, which essentially Minos had promised Poseidon he was gonna like sacrifice this bull to Poseidon to get something. Then he changes his mind because he really loved the bull and he tries to trick Poseidon. So Poseidon curses him by making his wife fall in love with the bull. They copulate and there came the Minotaur, who ends up being trapped in like a labyrinth. So again, you know, the bestiality, I guess, is parallel to all the incest that was going on in the background. That, of course, gave way to Cal. Not really, but according to the book. And, you know, the whole labyrinth idea of being trapped is, of course, Cal being trapped in their anxieties and their fears, in this femininity that they you know, didn't accept and they didn't connect with, and all of that. And lastly, you know, we have the whole idea of prophecies. Desdemona was always trying to like prophesize through silk and spoons and all these things, and you know, finally her prophecy does come true in realizing that Cal is the punishment for her, you know, her sins with Lefty. But at the same time, it doesn't end on a tragic note because Cal accepts who they are and they don't see themselves as a mistake. So what's it all about? I think at its core, one of the biggest messages that maybe unintentionally Middlesex promotes is the absolute need to ensure that there are spaces where people can talk about their sexuality and their identity freely, so that nobody feels like Cal did. Nobody has to go around struggling, feeling like they don't belong or like there's something wrong with them. You know, we need to embrace this new terminology and the correct terminology, or else we're never really going to make any progress. And, you know, we need to talk more about intersexuality. It's not really something that I think comes up a lot in, you know, public conversations. So, you know, I think it's important to have that space for people, you know, real life people like Cal, to be able to embrace who they are. It's definitely why Middlesex is definitely like a top rated, like 4.5 star book for me, and I would recommend that if you haven't read it yet, you definitely go ahead and get on it. Alright, so thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and to comment your own thoughts on this video. Make sure you also subscribe for more videos like this and hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload every Wednesday and Sunday, and I'll see you guys next time.